Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Wrestling with Reality podcast. We're going to get real right here on the Wrestling with Reality podcast. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe to this channel. These shows have been a lot of fun. These interviews have been great, and we're going to keep rolling along right now. My name is Kris Kloss, your host, Eric Melikian right up there, your other host, and it's been great doing these. Again, can't emphasize that enough. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Our guest on this edition of the Wrestling with Reality podcast is that dude right there. He's Logan X, MPW founder, owner, operator. And we're not just going to talk about that because we all go back in time together. We're going to go back in the day, the UIWA, you name it, all the great stars that have come through. Your involvement as well as mine, two separate occasions with the great Roddy Piper. We'll talk all about that with your Unpinned documentary. Sure. Logan X, Paul, my friend, welcome to the Wrestling with Reality podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Kris? It's interesting to me too that you know I'm in this situation here where I've got one of my commentators. And I've also got one of my referees. So,
yeah.
So at different times,
there you go.
You've both been employed by me. So that's kind of fun to share the stage with you.
That's right.
Absolutely, it's great to go back down memory lane here and catch up.
So where do you want to start?
Well, Paul, why don't you give us a little breakdown about how you broke into professional wrestling?
I broke into professional wrestling. So I've been a wrestling fan since I was 5. Started watching wrestling with my great grandmother, who lived to be 104 years old. I started wrestling at 17. I went to my first live wrestling show, which was at Pauley High School in May of 1998. There's this promotion called Southern California Championship Wrestling. Which was run by Kevin Kleinrock, Dynamite Darren McMillan, and Patrick Hernandez. So the late, great Dynamite D, Kevin Kleinrock, who went on to do a whole bunch of different things in wrestling, and then Patrick, who was, the head official in XPW. They were running that promotion. I met that. It wasn't that day that I met him, but that was the first time I saw live wrestling, and that was the day that I met that I first watched Cincinnati Red wrestle. So I knew as soon as I saw that show, I want to get involved with this promotion because I didn't know that there was independent wrestling. I'd only seen, the WWF and WCW, and I mean the bigger promotions that were on TV. And then obviously ECW was really going strong then. And so it was the closest I had been to a ring. I thought that was really cool. They had a show at UCLA, I think a month later, where they had Yokozuna and the Honky Tonk Man on it, and they were wrestling against. Yoko was teamed up with Jess Hansen, and Honky was teaming with Red. So I saw Red again there, and I watched that show. I thought that show was awesome. Kloss, you were at that show in the audience with me. You were screaming. You were doing the Fink voice.
No,
it was before.
I was running out for that show.
Okay, so
I was part of that.
It might have been might have been the show before that you weren't. There was somewhere where they identified you in the audience and you were doing the Fink voice, and then they might have moved you on to right in there. So we basically broke in right about the same time because I watched that show. I watched Red work with these WWF guys, and so I was like, okay, like. And I was in the audience, and a guy, Ryan McGonigal, High Flying Johnny Hemp, came out. He had wrestled earlier the night, and he had flyers for an IWF show in Simi Valley. And he's explaining to me, look, see, our guys, look, they can go right into a match with the WWF guys. So that's the kind of training you'll get over here, whatever. So I go down to the Grappler's Den in Simi, and Red's the trainer, and I took a class. And as soon as I got in that class, it was like, this is what I'm doing. And I was at 17 years old. I dropped out of high school to pursue a career in professional wrestling. I emptied my bank account, whatever I had in it. I stopped going to school, and I was at that fucking school with. Oh wait, are we allowed to swear on here? I don't know.
Yeah, go for it.
I was at that school
right.
with Red like every day afterwards. I was training 4 days a week because they had 2 classes of the week where the IWF's SCCW rented the facility for their school 2 days out of the week. I trained 4 days out of the week and quickly screwed my head up, So unlike most people, I ended up getting my first match after about training for about 2 months. Probably because Red needed a ride to Arizona. There was a show for, I think, Combat Championship Wrestling in Tucson, Arizona. It took place at a Greyhound racing track. Outside, the dogs were running around the track in a rainstorm in a boxing ring. And it was like a 2-minute squash match to Red where he kicked the shit out of me, and that was that. And I had the best time of my life. It was like the most ridiculous, like I drove 8 hours each way for a 2-minute squash match with my trainer who, I mean, just, the guys, we don't have a lot of squash matches on the independents now. I was 130 pounds. I was, 17 years old, and I was wrestling Cincinnati Red, who was 6 feet tall, 265. And when he squashed you, he literally squashed you. So that was how that went. That was my break into the business. I started wrestling anywhere and everywhere I could after that. And while I was on the independent circuit, it got to a point where at some point I wrestled like 13 matches 1 month doing different shows because I would always I maintained a job. Like I maintained like a Monday through Thursday part-time job living with my parents. And I would drive anywhere in the state that I could go get a match somewhere. And we weren't getting any money doing it because that just wasn't the way it worked. There was like probably, I don't know, 50, 60 wrestlers in the state at the time because you see the same guys on every show. Like it didn't matter what promotion you went to. It was like there's Supreme and there's Chaos and there's Jack Studd and there's Red and there's White Trash Johnny Webb. It was the same guys on every show, but it was be for different promotions and different whatever. And it was like, oh, okay, well, these boys are here. And they had a few different local boys to each thing, but the guys who traveled around, you see the same guys over and over again. And so I was on the independent circuit for several years. And while I was doing that, I figured out kind of some of the logistics on putting a promotion together. And I thought, I'll take a shot at doing this. Maybe I can do it better than some other places. There were these matches that never happened places that I really wanted to see. I might be jumping too far ahead here to when I started MPW, but on the way up, what I saw, I guess I got more that I can tell on there and just kind of stop me if I'm rambling too much. Started out, different places, UIWA, WPW, California Championship Wrestling in San Diego. And then I started moving on to some of the larger feds. And there was a time where it was proposed that I was going to go to XPW. I was I don't say recruited, but the UIWA had run a couple of television shows on KJLA, and apparently I was in several of the episodes that aired. Rob Black saw me in those TV shows, and he had a character that he wanted me to portray, which wasn't super flattering. I was, again, I'm 17 years old. I'm 5'7". I'm 130 pounds. He wanted me to be little bitch, BYTCH. And he had this whole gimmick. Basically, he wanted me to be Spike Dudley in XPW, and had plans for me to work with Big Dick Dudley and all this other kind of stuff. And that never came to be. It never came to be because my trainer chose not to go there. And some of the guys that I came up with didn't decide not to go there. There was actually Red was there's this whole character that was carved out for Red. They wanted to call him Crimson, and they want him to have the drama masks on his singlet and with blood coming down him. And there's all kinds of different ideas that they had for him. XPW wanted guys to be exclusive, and that wasn't happening with him. So it wasn't happening with me because, I had maybe a year and a half in, maybe 30, 40 matches by then. It would have been too restricting to me in terms of what type of growth I wanted to have, even though it was a great opportunity, because it was a large promotion that, you're performing in front of 500 people a night instead of 30. and you're working in like big arenas at times. You know, it's like they're running shows at the LA Sports Arena and stuff like that. And I chose basically like, nope, I'd rather go to the Ventura Theater with UIWA than go over here with them. And that wasn't, again, it wasn't anything personal. I just thought I want to get more matches. I'm not going to get them over here. This is going to be a once a month thing, and that's kind of how that went.
Right.
What were your memories dealing with Rob Black?
Rob was an interesting guy because it was very clear to me very fast that Rob was what we refer to in wrestling as a money mark. And what I mean by that was this: XPW, for the shows they put on, for the matches they put on, and for what type of product they produce, that company did nothing but lose money. That company never made a dime. There's some people who made money working there, but that was a tax write-off. So it was his hobby. That was something fun for him. But he lost, I don't know how much money he lost on that promotion. And I want to say there's nothing wrong with it because that's his money. He can do what he wants with it. And a lot of the boys that lived out here got opportunities to do things and work with guys they would have never gotten otherwise. So I'm not trying to detract from that, but the reality is, in terms of it being a business, like it was basically a burn your money up and you can kind of play with what you're playing with out there now. And so that's what my impression of Rob Black was he doesn't understand the business of professional wrestling. His business model is never going to be successful because he spends more than he takes in. But I don't know if that was ever what the intention for it was. Because, I mean, at the time, he was the owner for Extreme Associates Porn Company, which in the VHS era, in the DVD era, I mean, that was an extremely successful company. Right? So, if you're making millions of dollars doing something, can you afford to lose money on something that gives you joy? So that's I don't make any judgments on that because I'm not in his head, but I do know that the company itself didn't make money. Now, by contrast, where I ended up at one point was I ended up with UPW, with Ultimate Pro Wrestling out in Huntington Beach, because that seemed the logical progression of like, oh, okay, well, this is the WWF feeder fed out here. So maybe I go there. And going there was I don't want to say it was the best thing that could have happened to me, but because what it did was it showed me how obvious it was that I wasn't going to the WWF or WCW or wherever. I'm there training in Huntington Beach. Rob Van Dam's leading the class. You've got, John Cena, you got Heidenreich, you've got the Miz, you have all of these guys who are these totally put together, buffed out bodybuilders who are 100 pounds bigger than me. And some of them are getting picked up. Some of them are getting signed to these contracts. But the guys who were bigger than me but weren't better than, but were a lot better than me weren't. So Cena got a contract like right away. Heidenreich got a contract like right away. Chris Daniels is there, and he's not getting a contract. And Daniels weighs 45 pounds more than me, or more, maybe 50 pounds more than me. And he's 10 times the wrestler I am. So I saw very clearly, like, I'm 18 years old at this point. This is clear to me that I'm not going to make it as a professional wrestler. And guys will go, oh, you're 18, you start hitting the gas, you put on some size, you keep going, you get a bunch of experience. It's like, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze on that to me, because then that's your life. And that's where you go with it. And unfortunately, I saw some guys try to make that happen, and it wasn't a great situation for them. One of the guys being Tim Fisher, who was Damian Steele in XPW. He at one point, I think he was an architect. I don't know if you remember Kloss or not, but he had like a really good day job. And he went to XPW and he became the champ over there. And so it was like, oh, okay, this is maybe I can do this for a living. He went over to UPW, tried to get into the WWF, and it never happened. He did go to Puerto Rico. He had some success with it, but wrestling is a very unforgiving life, and it's a very unforgiving business. And how things ended up eventually for him, I wonder if he had made different choices in terms of like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with being the weekend warrior. There's nothing wrong with being an independent wrestler and enjoying that and being satisfied with that and not making it your life. So going to UPW with those guys and, you know, watching John Cena go from somebody who didn't know how to run the ropes to he's got a contract, you know, 4 matches in or however fast it happened fast for him. His first show was at the Roxy Theater in Hollywood. So we're working the show at the Roxy. Bruce Pritchard's there, and it was when he was like the talent scout. He was going out there and signing guys and whatnot. And I'm wrestling a guy named Andy Judge, and we go out there, and I'm doing moonsaults out of the ring, and I'm flying around, and Andy's doing his high-flying stuff and whatever. And I see Bruce is over at the bar having a drink. He's not even watching us wrestle. When Cena comes out, and the first thing he does is he comes out and he hits a big pose like up there on the stage. And I see Bruce is just like locked. Oh, look at this guy. And he went in there and he had a very basic match. I forgot who he was wrestling. But it was like, oh, okay. And he gets picked up that quickly. And it was explained to me early on from my trainer, you need 3 things in wrestling. You need the look, the talent, and the gimmick. The look was first. And that was 98, so that was or 99 at that point. That was in that era of like they like big bodybuilders. It was somebody Chris Bell had found at Gold's Gym. Cena getting signed that fast to me was like this. I had an epiphany of like, okay, I understand that's what they're looking for. It's not me. But what's interesting about it is I had no idea I was staring at the future member of the Mount Rushmore of wrestling. Like, you can argue different eras and you can argue this and that, whatever. Cena's at least in the conversation to be on there because he was the top guy there for 10 years, you know? So,
and he's had mainstream success too outside of wrestling.
That's the other part is like the guy who goes on to become a legitimate movie star afterwards. So what I was comparing myself to is something that was so it's such a one-off, you know what I mean? Like there's he fits on like, okay, you can go Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, John Cena, like they're like he's in the conversation on it. You can fluctuate some names, but that's in terms of actual success and whatnot. So it was like it was kind of a blessing in that like, okay, that's not going to happen, but that's okay. Like, let me figure out something else. So I started working security over at the Northridge Mall at the same time I was still wrestling. And I started MPW because I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to start trying to pursue maybe a career in law enforcement, but let me run this promotion. Let me run my own promotion. And I booked a show because Barry Cohen, our buddy, your friend and mine, Barry B.S. Cohen, shout out to Barry if he's watching out there, had a hookup with the Jewish Community Center where we could get the building for cheap. So he's like, hey, you know, I can do this. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Let's book a show there. And I rented the ring from Martin Marin from WPW. He made lots of money for me, by the way. Shout out to Martin. Martin's one of the old school dogs that's still walking around somewhere.
That's right.
So we rented the ring, but the idea behind it was I wanted to see Christopher Daniels wrestle Frankie Kazarian, and that was the whole idea before that, you know. I booked a 4-man tournament for that. I had Daniels wrestling Psychosis, and then I had Kazarian against. I forgot who it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be Cena. That's right. So I had Cena booked on the first MPW show. So it was supposed to be the Prototype versus Kazarian, and then Psychosis against Daniels, and then Kazarian and Daniels advanced and wrestled each other in the finals. Cena got booked in Saudi Arabia somehow on the same date that was happening. And so he was obviously going to go do that, and I take the $20 I was going to give for that show or whatever. So he fell off that. Daniels contacts me and goes, hey, he's out, but there's this guy just moved here from Chicago. His name's Adam Pearce. He's really good. I think you should plug him into that spot that Cena had. Cool. Okay, great. Like you say, he's that good. He's that good. And so then I met Adam before the show happened. Adam came up. Somehow he was up here. He moved to San Diego. He was up in the valley where I lived. He gave me his promo tape, which I still have somewhere on VHS, which is, probably need to find that, put that on YouTube or something with Adam's permission, obviously, because it's this video of young Adam Pearce, all from Chicago. So he's working the show. The night the show happened, Psychosis no shows, which saved me $400. I was pretty happy about that because the main event that we got was so much better than what would have happened otherwise. The great Dan Farron, who worked with MPW for years. The Psychosis didn't show up, and it's my first show. I'm 20 years old. I'm dejected. I'm like, oh shit, these people are all going to want to leave because we had like 150 people there or something. It was a decent draw for the size building we had. The situation was Farron comes up and goes, don't worry about it. Listen, I'll go out there, I'll put the title over, and then I'll make it a three-way dance with these guys. So that is what played out. The first main event of MPW's first show, March 10th, 2001, was Frankie Kazarian versus Christopher Daniels versus Scrap Iron Adam Pearce. And it was a 30-minute match. They were, three of the best wrestlers I'd ever seen, and it was the first time that they all wrestled with each other. If you ask Kazarian to this day what his favorite matches are of his career, his favorite match, he lists two of them. One of them is the main event that he had with Kurt Angle at TNA's whatever pay-per-view that was. And the other one is the MPW match with Adam Pearce and Chris Daniels. So
wow.
It's kind of a cool beginning to this promotion that I'm starting with nothing but elbow grease. My friend Barry and the Jewish Community Center over there in Woodland Hills was like that match lived in infamy, and a whole bunch of things had to go wrong for that. John Cena had to fall off the show to get Pearce in there, and then Psychosis had a no show, and then it ended up with this other thing. So that's how that happened. So that was my first show, and it was successful. The interesting thing that happened afterwards was Rick Bassman, who, by the way, I think is a great guy. If Rick Bassman's watching, shout out to Rick Bassman. Yeah. He was running UPW. He was in charge of it while I was there. Rick got 14 people signed to the WWF. Rick, in terms of like the different business models from what Rob Black had to what Rick Bassman had, Rob Black was running a promotion that was for his enjoyment. Rick Bassman was running a business, and Rick Bassman, I don't know if he was under contract with the WWF, but he was getting money from them on a regular basis for being himself. He got all these people signed, and he had to protect his business model. When he saw MPW and the pop that it got and the buzz and the fact that I was using guys that he was using regularly, he pulls Kazarian, he pulls the Ballards, he pulled, I forgot who else he pulled. He pulled several guys that were working for me saying, listen, you can work other places, but you can't work for XPW or MPW. And so all the right. UPW guys got pulled. Oh, he pulled Samoa Joe. That was the other guy. That's, I guess, something else I should talk about. Joe, the first bump Joe ever took in a ring was at the UIWA school. I owned 10.5% of that ring or whatever the hell it is. And so Joe started out at a school that I owned a little piece of. Joe became better than all of us real fast, and that's why he is who he is today. But Joe was on the first show also. Him and Red did a hardcore match, and Joe said before the match, because it was Martin's ring, he goes, "Just so you know, I'm going to go out there and break the ring because Martin's out there hammering nails, banging shit together or whatnot." And Joe went out there and hit the ropes as hard as he could, snap the cable like as fast as he could. Him and Red they were doing a hardcore match, so they had all the junk and they're hitting each other with shit and whatever, and they got through their match even like that. But Martin had to fix it afterwards. It was kind of Joe's way to rib Martin because the ring had broken off, and so yeah.
No, man, this is all beyond fascinating.
Well, so I'm trying to not skip any of it. Try not to skip any of it because there's so much, and it was so long ago, and I haven't talked about this stuff in forever.
Well, let me bring up then, because around this time, MPW Next XPW was probably the hottest local promotion in all of Southern California, bar none.
Yeah, and so the second show was I had a little Guido coming in from ECW. They had just closed up shop. And so when they closed up, it was like I booked him real fast, and he was supposed to wrestle Kazarian and put Kazarian over as his first title defense. Like, okay, hey, that basically puts the belt over because I'm trying to make the belt mean something. Kazarian has to come out and surrender the belt because he can't work the show anymore. And so he at least came out and said, hey, basically, based on a contract I have with UPW, I can't work here anymore. I have to surrender the title. He surrenders it to Guido. So Guido's our champion for an hour and a half. And the only person I trusted after that to carry the belt for the next little bit while we're going was Red. Because I knew he wasn't going anywhere. He can work with anybody. And he doesn't, he'll bring legitimacy to it just by being himself. And so he wrestles Guido. Guido puts him over, kind of begrudgingly because he didn't know him. But he put him over. Red's the champ. Red forms a stable with basically the guy. His name was Ed. Basically, went by the name Boston Black. He was like 450 pounds. He was a kind of a manager gopher type guy, but he was huge. He got brought in by Guido just because Guido didn't want to do a clean job. So he's like, all right, this fat guy here, have him give me a splash in the middle of it or whatever. And we had Pierce join up with Red. So, and that was one of my favorite stables that ever existed in MPW was Cincinnati Red, Boston Black, and Adam Pierce. And Red's the champ. Bringing Chris Chetty from ECW next show. Red wrestles him and beats him. So again, the legacy with the title still going. The second show, we had some openings because we had all these UPW guys get pulled. So we booked guys from Rev Pro. We booked Super Dragon against Rising Sun. And that was when Rev Pro was it was this kind of well-received small promotion.
Right.
But they had this reputation of kind of only working with each other. So it was this thing of okay, are these guys practicing their matches out, or what are they doing beforehand, or whatever? So what we did Dragon and Rising Sun have their match. It's really good, but they have they worked together so many times before. It didn't really do anything to elevate either of them because they had already done that. So what ended up happening was the next show I brought in Low Key. I had seen Low Key on Shotgun Saturday Night. I got his number from, I forgot who I got a hold of him from. But it was all right, we're going to bring in Low Key. I wanted Low Key to wrestle Chris Daniels. Daniels was potentially going to be around still, but what ended up happening was, not between our first show and our second show, but I had him booked for 2 shows. He got signed with WCW. So he was leaving. So the first show he did with us was boom, he's leaving. This guy's going to the big leagues. And so there was this gap then, and I needed to find somebody to wrestle Low Key. So Dragon wrestles Sun, great match, and I asked Dragon, I'm like, hey, do you want to work with Low Key next show? He's like, yeah, that'd be great. And I thought it was a chance for him to show that he could work with somebody that caliber that he's never seen before, he's never talked to, he's never whatever. And they went out there and they had a hell of a match. It's one of my favorite matches. The finish was somewhat bullshit because Loki just flat out refused to do a job for Dragon. I wasn't going to bring in Loki to go over on one of my guys. I guess it probably, in retrospect, the way that the finish was, I could have done a better job with it. Again, it's my second show that I'm booking. I'm arguing with this guy from the East Coast who I've never met outside of, the brief conversation we had prior to him coming and then getting out there. And he's like, I'm not putting him over. I'm like, well, it does my promotion no good for you to come in here and beat him. So I'm like, well, then can you guys go to a draw? And he begrudgingly agreed to that. The way the finish was basically at some point they do this midair collision and we say it goes, they get up, they start cracking each other afterwards. And then the time limit expires, the bell rings. That was hokey for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's not based on actual time. It's not like we had somebody sitting there go, okay, this is 20 minutes into it. It's just when they got to that spot is when that happened. The other part was the freaking midair collision should have been the end of the match because they did a total not spot fest, but like they were one-upping each other with their moves, hitting a freaking Phoenix splash, and then I'm going to do this double tope freaking backflip, like all over the place. And it was awesome. The midair collision, that should have been it. They should have both crashed and done a 10 count, and that should have been the end of the match. That's just not what happened. So the finish to that match sucked, but the match itself, that elevated, I don't say it elevated Dragon like I'm trying to take credit for it. But what it was I gave him an opportunity to work with somebody that all these guys marked out for. And when he was able to produce that type of match, they're like, oh, okay, this guy's legit. A few shows later, I brought in Jardy France from APW to work with Dragon, and they had a hell of a match. And so then it was like, okay, Super Dragon's legit. And every show was like I'm going to end up releasing them. I have them all on mini DVs still, the original shows, and I've hung on to them forever. There's been different people that have tried to buy them from me different ways and whatnot because they want the rights to them. All these guys that went on to make something of themselves in the business, I've got early on stuff with them. Tons of early Rocky Romero, tons of early Samoa Joe. When the Messiah left XPW, when Billy left XPW, I was the first guy who got a hold of him. I said, hey, I got a show this Saturday. Like, you want to come down and work? And he's like, well, and I made him an offer, and he's like, well, I actually, because that was his job too at the time. Like he was working at XPW at the same time. So Extreme. It was like he got clipped. Right. So he needed to come up with money. So basically he's like, well, I got a gig, hold the boom mic that day for 8 hours. But I'll come wrestle for you if you can match this. And I'm like, yeah, cool. All right, I did. And so when it was time for him to come down, I was like, who am I going to put him with? I'm like, all right, I'll put him with Adam Pearce because these guys can really do, these guys will have a good match. The next show, I've got the Messiah there. And then I got Vampiro for really cheap. Vampiro comes down and he basically says, hey, I'm interested in working your show. I'm like, okay, well, I can't pay you. I know what you usually make. I can't pay you that. He goes, no, I'll do it for this much. And it was for way less than what his normal stuff was. He just said, fave that, which that was 24 years ago. So I don't think he's going to be upset about it now. If he is, too bad. That's that. But so I go, okay, well, who am I going to put him with? Well, him and Messiah had a feud in XPW. I'm like, all right, I'll put him with the Messiah. So I got the same match for peanuts compared to what Rob paid for it, and it came to me organically. That's kind of been MPW's story since then. We get all kinds of, I would say, cheap labor and freebies because we exist. So, I mean, that first run we had was great. In terms of like, we put on some of the best indie all-star shows that had happened in Southern California. In terms of it being a business model, I'm ragging on Rob Black about his business model. Mine wasn't any better. I was losing losing money every show. But I'm losing $300-400. I'm not losing a lot. But when you're a security guard at the mall, that's significant, right? So after like a year of that, it was like, okay, that was cool, but I've got to kind of start. I got to kind of hang this up for a while because I want to start processing with these different police departments. And if I'm wrestling and I blow my knee out, then I'm not going to get on the job. And by the time I started MPW, I started wrestling for myself exclusively. I would always put myself in either the first match or, the second match. I made sure that I didn't put myself over all the time, which most promoters, kind of have a problem with. I made sure I did like I jobbed for Jason Peterson on our second show because I thought he was a great guy. Then I ended up pulling myself off of some of my shows because we just had too many guys booked and too many guys showing up with their bags saying, "Please give me a shot." We closed up shop in 2002. We ran, I think, like 8 or 9 shows. Some of the best times that I had in wrestling were there. But I also felt like I had somewhat conquered independent wrestling in terms of like, I got in there. I have all my health. I have some great memories. I got some great friends, and I can kind of move on from this a bit. So, so I stopped doing that. I started processing. A couple years later, I'm a police officer, and my life is going really well. At some point, my police work and wrestling merged. There's a documentary film crew that approached me about filming a documentary about my life. They thought it was real interesting stories that you go from high school dropout to pro wrestler to police officer. And so that's an interesting story, and we can kind of tell that. And I was like, well, okay, but in order for there to be some culmination of this story, then I have to get back into wrestling so that it benefits police work. Like that was the idea behind it, was like, okay, well, my
Right.
two worlds can merge. And so I'm like, well, let's run a charity show for the Police Explorer program. And in the process of that happening, a whole bunch of other stuff happened that I'm not going to necessarily get into now, because you can see all that on YouTube, on Apple iTunes, and a whole bunch of different places. The documentary is called Unpinned, UNPINNED. Selfless plug there, that you can buy on any of those platforms, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about in great detail. The journey through that, I'll march through some of the things that happened there. In getting back into wrestling, it was 2010 at that point. I had been out of the business for 8 years. I started training with Rick Bassman. Not Rick Bassman. I'm sorry. Rick Drayson was who I started training with. He had a ring up in Sherman Oaks. He had a wrestling school there. Trained with, tremendous guy. God rest his soul. He welcomed me in with open arms. He had a bunch of guys training there. One of the guys, a guy named Austin, who was training there, who some people may or may not know is Luchasaurus now in AEW. Trained with Rick for a while, and then through that process, I ended up becoming friends with Roddy Piper. And the way that this came about was, I'm sure you guys remember the movie The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
Yes.
Okay.
Not around the same time you did this.
Yeah. So where I got this idea from was my buddy Ken, who's all in Hollywood and knows people there and whatnot, heard from somebody that at a screening of The Wrestler, Roddy was there watching it, and they basically said Roddy sat down, and from the time the film started, and Mickey Rourke's character is who he is, Roddy cried from the time the movie started till the end of the movie. And what that communicated to me was, first of all, if you've watched that, if you've been involved in wrestling and you watched that film, you know how well they did hitting it out of the park of like, this is the reality of pro wrestling.
Yeah.
This isn't the glamorous, side of whatnot. This is the reality for it. And so for Roddy to cry through that whole thing, that means it hit him in places where he was still wounded, because he'd had to endure so much during the course of his career. I had gotten by then I had been a cop for 7 or 8 years. I had gotten awards from all kinds of different branches of government, stuff that sounds probably more prestigious than it is. Some congressman gave me an award for distinguished service to the community or whatever. And it's cool. It's like, hey, it's my name on it, Officer Paul Ventimiglia, and the Distinguished Service Committee, Congressman Howard Berman or whatever. It's a cool certificate. What I wanted to do with it was I wanted to give it to Roddy to say, hey, all that pain that you endured, all that stuff you took on, all of what made you cry through that whole movie that's in you, that wasn't just for no reason. I know that, you made your living at it and you got paid doing that, but here's some of the tangible good that came from that. And it was like, because you were who you were, you helped inspire me when I was 5 to courageously chase after things that I wanted, which included eventually becoming a police officer that's validated by this award that he's got from Congress. So what I wanted to do with that was I wanted to give it to Roddy as a way to say, look, this is like, you had to suffer all that stuff. This is yours. It's yours because you helped me get there. And so I got a hold of his agent through Rick, because Drayson knew him from when they worked the Grand Olympic Auditorium territory together and whatnot. And so he was in contact with his agent. He knew Roddy, but he didn't want to just give me that direct access. But I talked to his agent. I'm like, hey, here's what I want to do. And she's like, oh, that's great. I'm like, so maybe we can film it in Rick's garage or something, because Rick had a green screen in his garage where he did his podcasts and stuff. She's like, garage? She's like, he's going to be on stage at the Hollywood Improv in like a week. You want to do it there? I'm like, shit, yeah, that sounds great. So I go there, full permission, everything, full police uniform. And Roddy is there to do, it's his first stand-up comedy act. He has no idea what's going to happen. He knew, okay, at some point, some guy's going to come up, whatever happen, he wants to, whatever. I go up there and I start talking, and I tell my little autobiography of like, hey, I was 5, and Roddy's been an ornament on my Christmas tree since then, still is to this day. But I went through my journey into pro wrestling and how Roddy was the guy who helped inspire me for that. Because I loved Hogan. Hogan was who you were supposed to love, right? But Roddy was small. Roddy was distinguishedly smaller than Hogan. I, being small my whole life, he was the guy who could beat up Hogan, who was smaller than him. It's like, oh, what's he got? Well, he had this moxie about him. He had this I'll fight anybody mentality. And in my business, my true business in law enforcement, you don't have a choice of when you fight somebody. It's people will try to take your freaking life, and that's happened. That's the reality of that. And again, wrestling is great in that, like, hey, we work together, and you got to be tough to do it, but it's not real. It's not a real combat situation. In my job, the shoot that's out there, it's real violence and it's uncontrolled, and it's usually, I mean, there can be weapons, guns, knives, hand grenades, like whatever it is. So the transition from this world where, even though it's a controlled situation, it's still very dangerous, to a completely uncontrolled situation like that was kind of some of the shift that I had to articulate. So I'm telling Roddy all this, and this is what you inspired, this is what I become, because you helped teach, you helped show me the way. This is the way. So when I gave him the certificate, I basically said to him, thank you for spending years on the road away from your family. Thank you for destroying your hip. Thank you for making your living in a business where you have to watch your fraternity brothers die years before it's their time. Thank you for inspiring a 5-year-old boy to follow his dreams. And thank you mostly from my heart for being Roddy Piper. And he starts crying on the fucking stage with 200 people in the room. Wow. He starts crying, and I give him the award. And afterwards, he was so grateful that so, I mean, and the cool thing is all the cameras are rolling. It's all in the documentary. You can see it unpinned movie, go up there, $10. There you go. He was touched by that. And he said to me at that point, hey, we're friends for life. And he stuck true to that. We're friends all the way up until he passed away. And it's interesting, like, they often say don't meet your heroes. Like when you idolize something, don't meet them because they won't be who you want them to be. I don't have a bad word to say about Roddy. Like, I don't know how he was earlier in life. At the point that I met him, it was after he had cancer. It's after he had Hodgkin's and he beat it. I don't know if he was in a reflective place or what, but that show that I'm talking about that we were doing for the Explorer program, he came down and he gave me an entire day of his life for free. I didn't pay him a dime for that show. He came out. Red and I did a Piper's Pit with Piper, like where we're setting up this main event. We're setting up the first ever hair versus badge match in professional wrestling, which had a whole other bunch of ramifications for it that I won't go into right now. But like, I got to be part of Piper's Pit with my trainer and share this moment with him. And so we have this back and forth. And then Roddy stays through this 3-hour show that we have. And in the main event, I'm getting Red stomping me. His manager, Tex Tunney's stomping me, the great Ken Knapsack. Whiskey Fist McIntosh is out there. He's stomping me. I'm getting beat up by 3 guys at once. And here comes my childhood hero who does a run and bop, 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 pops everybody, goes at it with Red, big sleeper hold, puts Red out, swanton bomb for me off the top, 1, 2, 3. I win the match. I pin my trainer because my childhood hero did a run in to save me. I never went to the WWE. I never made $1 million in the business. There's nothing that's ever going to be better for me in wrestling ever than that moment. And like, sometimes they say like, sometimes if you reach for the stars, sometimes you get to the moon. That was my getting to the moon. And that's good enough. I mean, that was so good enough. And I can't explain to you what it's like. I mean, and you guys have worked with a whole bunch of different guys, so you have an idea of this. But if somebody who hasn't experienced this, when you grow up watching somebody and then you're working with them and you earn their respect and they give you a stamp and say you did great, it's like you can't quantify that. That's I was always the guy who was too small for this business, but I wasn't too small for that. And that's something that I can carry with me proudly forever. And then this documentary happens about it. So like when I'm dead in the ground somewhere, my great grandkids can watch that and go, man, that fool was crazy, or whatever they think, But they can see there's this like time capsule portion of my life that was there. So that whole thing wouldn't have been what it was without Roddy giving me a day of his life. And when somebody passes away early, like he did, it really kind of hits home of like, that's a day he could have had with his family, right? And I've expressed, because I was friends with Cole afterwards. I met Ariel when she was that night. Actually, I met Ariel, his wife. I've kept in contact with them a little bit here and there. I thank them for the time that he gave me, because that was time that he could have given them. The fact that there is this footage of him out there that exists, I hope that, I don't say it brings him comfort, because how are you comforting when your father's gone? But that there's this additional footage of him where he gets where his sacrifices were appreciated in a way that I don't know if they had been otherwise. So that was like my kind of crowning achievement in wrestling. That was also the restart of MPW in 2010. And we haven't stopped since then. We have not, like it's 2025 now. So for the last 15 years, we've been going solid since then. And there's been different eras of MPW. That was the road shows, and we're out here and we're making okay money, or we're not, or we're kind of a little bit ahead, and we're kind of not. But we're running decent shows, and I had a bunch of guys come through there who went on to do other stuff later. Ryan Taylor's one of them, who was I forgot what his name was when he finally went to WWE. Tyler Russ, I think, was his name. Brian Cage came through there. Peter Avalon, a bunch of guys who moved on to bigger and better things eventually. Where things started to shift was in 2012. I opened my first wrestling school. It was Bump University. Bump U was kind of a rib, but opened that up, and the head trainer there was a guy named Seth Skyfire. Stephen Atkins is his name. I don't know if you're familiar with Seth Skyfire or not. Probably the greatest near miss in pro wrestling history, as far as I'm concerned. He was signed with WWE when they were with OVW. He and CM Punk were the OVW Tag Team Champions. They feuded over the OVW title, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Steve was, according to the guys over there, the guys running OVW, Steve was the best babyface in the business, period, at one point in time. That's according to Jim Cornette's notes that basically nobody had access to, but Seth confessed they broke into the office one night to figure out what was there, and that was one of the things that was written down. Problem with Seth Skyfire is he's 5'6". If he was 6'1", he would be world famous, and that would be that. He would have been as good as anybody's ever been. Because he was 5'6", he never got moved up. He never got bumped up to TV, and it's bullshit. What's unfortunate is if he would have come along today, 5'6" wouldn't have mattered, but it was when 5'6" really did matter. And he had saved his money from when he was under contract. He put himself through special effects school. He went to work out here in the movie industry, makes a good living now, where he's got a beautiful family and a couple kids and whatnot. But he was nice enough to train the next generation of wrestlers, and that school was open for a little bit. One of the guys that kind of came through there, a guy named Jason Flame, who had a karate school at Moore Park, and found a building and was like, "Hey, man, you want to open a wrestling school? You can get it, do it pretty cheap out here." And so that was where Bump U closed and transitioned to the Millennium Wrestling Academy. Opened there and basically created an entire new generation of wrestlers that are very prominent in the scene now. Millennium Wrestling Academy was in a 900 square foot box. It was a giant rectangle with nothing in it but a bathroom and a carpet. Had no air conditioning. Had no locker room. Hard and shit in the summer. City of Moore Park didn't really give us permission to run shows. We did anyways. This is where I used all of my combined knowledge of what I had obtained in the wrestling business so far. And that was, all right, road shows typically run over budget. You run a school by itself, that doesn't really pay the bills by on its own. Kind of need both components. So when I rented this building, we could fit maybe 60 chairs in there if we're crammed in there. But it was big enough where I could put on weekly shows. And so I was like, all right, we're going to run a school that trains Monday through Thursday. We're going to run a show every Friday. And we have been running that way for the last, I think, 8 years, 9 years, something like that. I don't remember exactly when we opened there. But it was, that's the problem. You get hit in the head a lot, and you get older, you forget shit. So we start our weekly shows. A guy who started with me very early on, a guy named Danny Devine, who is, I think one of the most underrated talents that's in SoCal. If you calculate, like, this guy started with me 8 years ago, we've been running weekly since then. Besides when COVID hit, the dude probably has, I don't know, 350 matches or something like that, just working for MPW.
Mm-hmm.
There's guys who've been in the business
Right.
25 years who don't have 350 matches. He trains all the time, and peeling the curtain back. He's the current booker for MPW, has been for the last X amount of years. So, if he's worked 350 shows for me, he's probably booked 150 of them. The product that MPW puts out now, and just let me know if I'm jumping around too much because I tend to ramble.
No, you're getting you're going, and this is great. You're going, and you're actually going in order, and
cool.
Awesome.
All right. Well, and we can go back to anything you want. But the product that MPW puts out now is the best product that the company's ever put out, and I say that with the first year involved with Samoa Joe and all those guys. What we produce now, and when I say we, it's like it's so funny. I'm Gordon Bombay from the Mighty Ducks 3 at this point with that promotion. In that I've got Danny over there, I've got Ray Rosas over there, I've got Brendan Devine, I have all of these. I've got guys on the production side of it, guys who make this thing happen every week. And all I have to do now is kind of hover over it. I say the Mighty Ducks 3 because if you remember, when they won, he wasn't even on the ice. He was up in the stands and just watched them celebrating together. And then he just left, right? That's kind of my role now. I am, it's just like kind of pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. What I do for that promotion, I mean, obviously I carry all the risk of what it can be, but I also keep all the bullshit out. Pro wrestling, there's a lot of scummy people, right? And when I was coming up, a lot of the guys had warrants and stuff like that. Don't show up to my show. Don't work my show if you got a warrant because I'll book your ass. You know what I mean? And so all of the riffraff that exists in the business, that doesn't bleed over to my promotion, because if it tries, you're gonna run into a wall that you don't want to run into. And because of that, I get to run it in kind of a little bit more of a kinder, gentler way. And I know, society, everything's kind of softened up or whatever, and that's a big complaint that people have. I was brought in very old school, kind of the tail end of kayfabe, when people really would beat the shit out of you out there, when you get tuned up. When guys would, Red, God bless Red, I love him. He used to make me, wash his underwear. I'd have to lend him my car anytime he wanted it because he didn't have a car. Most pro wrestling trainers don't have cars on the independent level. So it's like if he wanted to go somewhere, he'd be like, "Hey, bring me your car. I need to go over here." Like, okay. And it's like a situation where you're paying dudes. Like, you're not gonna say no to that. He made me moon a cop while we're driving to Arizona. Like, he's like, "Let's see if you can get busted." Like, okay. There was a lot of it wasn't mistreatment, which just came up old school. He powerbombed me so hard one time that once he dropped me on my head, my own knee hit me in the face and gave me a concussion. He was an old school trainer, but he was also kind of like the big brother I never had, and he was literally the bridge from like childhood to adulthood to me. It was like, all right, this guy's gonna crack you 16 different ways, So so that was my upbringing in the business. I don't treat my guys like that. I don't. It's not that there's no place for it. It's just that's not the way MPW does things. It's kind of like if you make effort, I'll give you a shot. If you come in and just try as hard as you can, I will try. I will make space for you. That doesn't mean you're going to be the champion of the show. That doesn't mean you're going to get on it, because we're not going to send you out there unless you're safe. But there's going to be space for you. I know some people don't agree with that. There's another local school that has a far more old school mentality. They're very successful. I cannot fault them for how they are at all. Their business model works for them. My business model works for me. In terms of like talking about the business of pro wrestling, the facility we're in now is, like I say, in Moore Park, we were a 900 square foot building for 3 years in Moore Park. We're now in a 3,000 square foot building in Chatsworth, and we've been there for, I think, 5 or 6 years. I don't make a ton of money from pro wrestling, but it's a beautiful supplement to my income. There's all kinds of extras that I have in life because of that. The business model is solid. There are some months where we have really good months and I come out way ahead. There's occasions where I got to come out of my pocket for it still. But it's never been, I mean, that would just be for that particular month. It's never been something where, since I opened MWA and combined that with the weekly shows, we've always turned a profit year in and year out, and we've grown since then. There's continual evolution I want to see from that. It's interesting is when we were in Moore Park, when the ownership of the building that we rented changed, and they wanted to jack up our rent. I didn't feel like it was worth it to pay that much money for that building. So I'm like, all right, let's close. We're going to close that. I'm going to push all these little birdies out of the nest, all my little ducklings that, are kind of there, especially if you're not a duckling. And so we're going to close, and we're going to let them all move on. Our last show there, the show's over, and everybody's crying. Ray Rosas, Danny Devine, they have this great match, goes back and forth. The match is over. Everybody from the back comes out. They're hugging each other. Everybody's crying. Danny's crying. Ray's crying. Daniel Moon's crying, who got drunk before that. Ray sits up on the top rope and gets on the microphone, and all the fans are crying. All the fans are banging on the ring. They're all crying, and I'm sitting there going, "Yeah, this is sad, but this is like, hey guys, this is good. Like, you can move on, and that's the way it goes." Ray starts talking, and he starts talking about what this promotion means to him, what this family means to him, and he went through everybody in the ring, every student that started out with us that had made it into the ring, wrestling on shows, and he put them all over. He gave everybody their he gave them all their props in there, thinking this is the last time we're all going to be here like this. And he's talking, and I go up, I get Danny hug while this is going on. I say, "I'll miss you the most, Scarecrow," and it was like this weird thing where everybody's sad, and for whatever reason, it just dawned on me all at once. I'm like, wait a minute, like, we don't have to close. I'm the one that decides that. And so, me being me, without giving it a second thought, once Ray's done with his speech, I grab the mic from him and I just start shooting. I go, "Hey," I didn't realize, because Moore Park's 30 miles away from where I live. And I was a detective right then, and I was working really hard cases and whatnot. So I was away from the promotion. What it ended up turning into was these guys grew into this family on their own, and they loved each other. And that's the magic of MPW. That's what, if you're not in with us, you don't know that. I don't want to say, well, you're not a part of that. Like, it's like, oh, there's some shame in that or something. It's just there is a family element to that once you're in, you're part of the group. Mm-hmm. They had fostered that on their own. And so when I got the mic, I'm like, "Hey, you know what? I just realized we don't have to close. I'll get us another building. I'll start whatever. We'll move into Simi Valley," right? Because I thought, all right, Simi's a right. And I said that, and as soon as I said that, it was like celebration. It was like like we had just won the World Series or something. The fans are going crazy. Everybody's jumping. All boys are jumping up and down, all the wrestlers in the ring, everybody's crying. It's like, and it was weird to me that like it took that thing for me to go, oh, wait a minute, we need to keep doing this. Ray Rosas literally saved the company by shooting from his heart about who he was and who and what the promotion meant to him and what the people in the promotion meant to him. And so I'm like, oh man, we're gonna keep this going. And it was so cool afterwards. They're yelling at Ernie, who's had been our ring announcer since Jump Street. And they're like, Ernie, play some music. And they're like, it's like, what should I play? Like, what do I play for this? And a bunch of the boys are like, Country Roads by John Denver. Well, that song, it's like, take me home, country roads, to the place that I belong. To the place that I belong.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's so fucking cool about that. Like, that's their place where they belong. And man, we got every race, creed, color, religion, sexual orientation, upside, downside. I don't care if you're a Martian, a cyborg. It doesn't matter. Everybody's welcome there, and everybody is embraced there. And it's the place where all of them found where they belong. It's the place where the flamboyantly, openly gay guy is tag team partners and tag team champions with the Catholic youth pastor at the same time. That's what MPW is. So it was just like, wow, okay, there's some magic here that I need to hang on to with these guys. And as life would have it, I found a building in Simi. We had paperwork done for it. We were supposed to open at a certain time, and it didn't work out because the building was owned by Public Storage. Once they figured out what we were, they're like, "Oh, you guys are like Ultimate Fight. You guys are real. We can't have people fighting in the buildings." And I'm like, "Nah, man. Like that's not. We're like this is choreographed. Like it'll be okay." Nope. They canceled. There's my dog with a sock right here. I got a bunch of dogs. Just so you guys know, I got 7 of them. That's my other big love in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that didn't work out. It worked out better as this building that presents itself in Chatsworth, and it's this beautiful location that's in this in the attic of Boulder Dash. This beautiful like indoor rock climbing place, and it's 30,000 square feet inside. We're kind of up in the mezzanine of that, and it's got this cool kind of Fight Club vibe to it when you go in there. But it's in a safe. I mean, when I say it's in a safe neighborhood, funny thing is, before COVID, it was a safe neighborhood, and then all the mutants moved on the street out there. Got to deal with them since then, but that's okay. But so it's at this beautiful location, and I don't want to say like, okay, hey, the rent's cheaper than it would be somewhere else, but because it's not this own standing independent structure, if I had the same facility but it was off on its own, I'd be paying double for it what it cost, and we wouldn't be able to afford it. So in this situation where all it's got to do is break even, and I'll keep it going, even if it goes under sometimes because it does really well others. It's given us this platform where we can grow the promotion. And what we shoot now is we are a legitimate weekly episodic TV show.
You're right.
Even we shoot it for YouTube, but you can go back 5 years of previous shows in that building. You can go back 8 years of previous shows in the old building. The production's better than it's ever been right now. We get money from YouTube for the views that we get. But what it allows is it allows the character development of these wrestlers that we get to tell these stories on a week in, week out basis. And you get to play around with different things. You get to alter your character. The fans, it's the same fans all the time. So they know what happened last week. They know what's happening 2 months from now. They care about these guys. They buy their merch. There's evolution of that. There's, hey, we're shooting TV, so play to the hard cam, or this is how this goes, or there's all this other stuff that goes into working for MPW on a regular basis that you're not going to get anywhere else. Because the guy who's booking,
right?
When Danny's booking, he's giving you direction. Ray had the book for a long time also, and Ray still gives a lot of direction there. There's things that are in mind when people are doing stuff. It's not just okay, hey, we're going to have two guys wrestle and they're going to do some moves to each other and you're going to figure out who they are during that process. I have a guy who comes out and he can dance during most of his entrance and not do crap in his match, and the fans are loving it. Gets the same pop as the guy who does the triple jump moonsault in the match before that, And for me, it's a pleasure to watch it. Sometimes I do commentary. I love doing commentary with Kloss. We rib each other during the commentary about stuff. We make references to all stuff where I'm trying to pop him the whole time and he's trying to pop me, and it's fun. It's fun to do that, especially because we've known each other for 25 years. We have his Ico Pro sign up in the arena, and it's just a shout out to the boys who still know what that is, and it's kind of a fun tribute to the old
right.
So that's about as involved as I get with it because I don't need to do anything else. All the bases are covered. And when somebody leaves or somebody rotates out, we rotate somebody else in. The thing really runs itself. I can kind of hover around it and I'll get consulted on things if need be. If anything financial comes up, obviously that's that. But really, man, that thing runs itself and just stuff just happens. Josh Barnett was on our show the other day because he just felt like showing up.
Yeah.
Like that's just a cool way that MPW works. My training staff over there, top notch. Seth Skyfire trained most of these guys from Jump Street, but he's taking a leave of absence right now because he's doing stand up. I got AMF trains on Mondays. He does the beginners class. Danny Devine is the trainer on Tuesdays. Ray Rosas on Wednesdays. Thursdays is a guy named Royce Isaacs, and Royce is just, in terms of like badass dudes walking around, I think Royce is a great guy to learn from. And contrast to the other guys. Like it's important for me that my trainers are all different and they they bring different things to the table. So when Seth said, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of time off, Royce was the obvious choice for me because of what he brings to the table. Obviously he's a champion in Japan. He's got all kinds of international experience. Good guy to learn from. So he plugged right in there well with my training staff. I charge a pretty reasonable rate for training. It's $300 down, which covers your first month and registration. It's $200 a month after that. And if you stay in the program long enough to where you're proficient, then you will wrestle on our shows. I guarantee that. I don't guarantee, guys will always call and be like, hey, so how quickly can I get to the WWE? I'm like, look, man, I'm not going to make you any promise about that. You got to be exceptional to go there. And so far, it's not many. But you will wrestle on live shows in front of a live audience, and that I can guarantee you. And anybody that's stayed in the training program long enough has seen that come to fruition. Probably now we've produced probably, 60, 70 wrestlers, something like that have gone out there, and some that have gone off to other places. Some of them are staying forever, and I'm very happy about that. So that's our current status right now. I hope we continue to grow. I need to put a little bit more money into some things to clean some stuff up soon there, because I think that we're not necessarily like we're going to move to the next level, because people, that's subjective to what that actually means. I just think that we're going to continue to put out a solid product that we can make even more solid moving forward a little bit. So that's my current status with wrestling. Go ahead. Do you have a question?
No, I was just gonna say. You gave, first off, you gave us the night off. Thank you, because you just walked us through your whole career. That was awesome. I know, Eric, you got a heart out, but man, you pretty much covered it all in order. You just talked about MPW, and I'll echo and validate all of what you said about MPW. I do tons of shows all over, and even with the exception of doing shows like for Title Match Network and Thriller TV that has a live pay-per-view, whatever. You are the only product that I do that is the only product that I do that is treated like a television show. You're right. It's on YouTube, but it's a weekly wrestling TV show. So yeah, absolutely. And man, that story you told about Piper, unbelievable,
Yeah.
beautiful story. And let me just echo that as well, because I didn't know him as long as you, but I literally met him a few months before he passed away. And the match I did with him, it's on YouTube. It's Rocky Romero versus Colt Toombs, Piper's son. It was the pilot episode we did for the would-be classic Wrestling Revolution. And got to meet him, his family. We worked together, and he was so gracious with me. Not hot dogging it like he's a star, not at all. And I couldn't have been more humbled and appreciative. We filmed the pilot. We were supposed to do the rest of the season. I actually went to Europe with my family. I'm in Italy. I just worked with him. You see on international news that the guy passed away, and I couldn't have been more devastated, more floored, and just shocked at the whole thing. But let me just tell you, man, everything you said about Roddy Piper is absolutely is you weren't sugarcoating it. That is the truth. And just wanted to echo and validate that for the audience. Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Paul, I want to backtrack.
Yeah.
You did cover a lot. Thank you so much. But
sure, I'm sure I missed some stuff.
Cover a few guys, few names that we've all, run past over the years.
Sure.
Tech 9, Byron McKinney.
Okay, so I actually regret kind of skipping over Byron. Byron, I don't know how many guys remember the first XPW show. Byron was Christian Blood in XPW. The match that he had with Supreme, that first main event at it was the Reseda Country Club for XPW, was one of my favorite matches I've ever seen in pro wrestling. It was, they had worked together so many times, but they did so well that night. And unfortunately, both those guys have passed away by now. Byron was 215 pounds, all muscle, and he could fly like nobody's business. Supreme is, everybody kind of, got a lot more time to look at him. He's just this like badass tough guy that, there's nobody that ever wanted to fight Lester. Like if you had it, if it was like, okay, hey, you're gonna be at odds with somebody, Lester's not the guy that you wanted to be at odds with, because he would kick your ass. I remember he was working with a guy named Victor. I don't know if you remember Victor Pavaldi or not. They're working the IWF TV taping, and Victor potatoed Lester somehow on like a reverse DDT. Lester no-sells it, gets up and kicks Victor in the head before Victor even stands up from the move. And as a fan, I'm watching that going, I don't know what just happened, but I wouldn't fuck with that guy with the tattoos on his head, Tech 9, he did a balcony dive at the country club. Supreme's on the table, and Byron jumps, I don't know, 20 feet or something out to where he is. He was so far out, and Byron was so high that when he climbed up there, I'm in the audience. I ran underneath where he was standing in case he fell, because I'm going to catch him if he does, right? Because he's my buddy that's up there. Part of what I wanted with MPW from the beginning was I wanted Byron to be our champion. Once it went to Red, the guy who won it from Red afterwards was Tech 9. And that was another dream match of mine. That was the most fun thing about running a promotion, is you get to book your dream matches. They had this match with each other, and it was everything that I wanted it to be. Byron had never gigged before. He wanted a blade for Red, and he did. It was like on a bulldog on a table, and like Byron stiffed the shit out of himself on the table, and he's bleeding all over the place. The image of, and it was the first promotion where Byron was the champion there. Like, he had won secondary titles and tag titles and whatnot. It was the first world title that he had. And I know people will dispute what a world title actually means. What I say to all of you is all the titles are gimmicks anyway, so stop being a mark. But in this case, it was the first time that Byron had been the world champion of a promotion, so he felt good about that. The image at the end after he beats Red is he comes up, his hands raised, he's got the belt in one hand, and he's bleeding out all over the place out of his forehead. I love that image of the champion that went through the challenger that went through adversity and has the visible wounds of the battle on his face, but also is coming away with the reward for it. So Byron was just a tremendous talent. His demons got a hold of him. He's a casualty of the business. He actually broke his wrist on an MPW. It wasn't on an MPW show. It was on a UIWA show. It was doing a leg drop on the outside of the ring in the same building. It was at the Jewish Community Center. He's doing a leg drop on the outside of the ring, but he puts his hand down, and when he comes down, he came down on his wrist in a funny way and broke it in a way that was screwed up. He had to have a rod put in there. He didn't have good insurance. And after that, it was kind of the journey down the pain pill gimmick, and that's ultimately, what ended his life early. Had Byron not had those demons, I mean, again, that's another guy who you could have seen, on TV every week.
I would say one of the best independent matches I've ever seen was when you booked the Messiah against Tech 9. I think that was the end of the first rendition of MPW.
Yes. Those guys, it's kind of no-brainers sometimes with things. It's like, okay, you have all these great wrestlers there, and who will do well with each other. It's just about getting out of the way. I mean, that's the thing now. Like, my last match was in 2018. It was me and my buddy Clint, who was Ecstasy in MPW, and he was Triple X later. It was us against Ray Rosas and Peter Avalon, and we worked them. I kind of came in as this like kind of last minute surprise type thing or whatever in that situation. But anyways, we're working with this solid team, and I knew very clearly how much they were carrying us, right? Because we're not only are we past our prime, we're not working regularly or whatever. They carry us through the match. They put us over. They give us this great pop. Clint and I are the MPW tag team champions. Clint and I met in high school at Birmingham High School. The first show at that I ever saw live at that SECW show, Clint and I are sitting next to each other in the audience, along with JR the Hell Kid Roberts out there. So that was kind of the culmination of like where we wanted to go, because we're like, oh, we'll get in this, we'll be tag team champions one day. It took 20 years for that to actually materialize, but it did happen. That was the last match that I had. I haven't worked a match since then, and the reason why I haven't is because, number one, I'm just taking a spot away from some 20-year-old who's just starting and is still going on their way up, and I don't need to. I don't need to get banged up if I don't need to. If the money's right, I get in there. When America's Got Talent came out and threw decent coin at me to do that gimmick with Chris Jericho for that guy, and take some bumps for Che Cabrera in there, like, cool, I'll do that. The Mentos people come in, we want to shoot a Mentos commercial here. Who you got? Like, all right, I'll get in there for that, because I'm getting paid decent. But I'm not just going to bump the bump anymore. That's not, those days are over for me. Right. I also don't want to take a spot away from anybody. So when you say, that you booked this match, it's about giving the spotlight to somebody else, and not making yourself work with all the all the best guys that are out there.
I do remember that first show, and that was absolutely, to this day, I remember that standout match between who is known Christian Blood and Supreme. We all in the back were, oh my gosh, that was the match for sure. Absolutely. No matter the stars we got, Big Dudley and Cronus, that was like, the draw, but everybody remembered that match.
Right. And what was so cool about that was after Byron won the first match, he goes over, and when he won it, they threw the mic into him. I don't know who did it, but they throw this mic into Byron,
Yeah.
and he picks it up because, like, I guess he's like, oh, hey, cut a promo or something. He picks it up and he holds the mic to his face and he doesn't say a word and he goes, boom, and he throws it down and he walked out. And that got a bigger pop than it would have if he said something. And from what I heard from some of the guys in the back, that Rob Black was pissed that he didn't cut a promo, right? But in the audience popped more. They're like, fuck yeah. He didn't have to say anything. He just beat the guy and he's like, I'm out of here. Like, I just handled my business.
Yeah.
Byron knew he was leaving, I think, shortly after that show, because Byron went and had a feud with Donovan Morgan, who's another great talent. But he started getting kind of jobbed out pretty quick, and as soon as he could get out of there, he did. He finished up whatever commitments he had with XPW and left, and then came over to MPW. So, it was
right.
It's just one of those things, man. Like, I wish that Byron got more of a spotlight than he did.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to lead into his former tag team partner, Kris,
Rob Courtney. He's I love Rob. Rob is, if anybody's going to tell you like it is, it was him.
Yeah.
He had no guile about, nothing about sugarcoating nothing. He told you exactly like it was from the beginning. He didn't pull any punches. He actually, the original MPW belt that I now own is the United Wrestling Council World Heavyweight title belt. It was his belt before. That belt made its appearance in a whole bunch of different promotions. I got to buy it from him at one point, which it's one of my, again, not to say I want to be buried with the thing, but that belt was held by Red and by Byron and by all these guys, a lot of whom aren't with us anymore. So it's like this, it's almost like this object that went through this relay race of all these talented wrestlers, and it made its way into MPW today and had around with the guys who are working now. We've created all our own belts, all our own promotion, belts now. So that belt's been retired, but Rob provided that. Rob, in terms of a worker, Rob was a guy you could put against anybody. He was a legitimately tough guy. He's working some show for Fred Valentine. It's somebody. Some guy stiffed him, and Rob just punches him in the face like as hard as he could. It was some ninja guy. I think it was the guy who went to XPW as the fake commentator afterwards. He was the imitation Larry Rivera.
Oh, Fantastico.
He was working as a ninja or something over at ACW for Fred Valentine, and he was stiffing the shit out of Rob. And I'm watching. I'm like, oh man, and Jason Peterson goes, that's not going to go well for him. At some point, Rob just fucking cold cocks him, and he comes back. Rob wins the match. He comes to the back, and as he's coming through the door, he goes, man, tell that ninja guy stop working so stiff. I'm laughing my ass off because he popped him, So, yeah, Kris was a great guy to have around.
Very intelligent. And you know what? A guy who knew from the beginning, I'm an independent wrestler. I'm doing this for fun. And I'm going to have my real life. He's got, successfully raised a great son by himself. Nothing but respect for the guy. Mm-hmm. Kris, you want to throw a name out?
No, no. I don't want to. I just want to talk about again. For longevity of it, I think is something that we can take from this, because you don't see that too much anywhere in this business and at the independent level. And the longevity is something to be to the good tributes to you for being able to do this, and you could see it. It's a machine that's not only working, but it's working the way it works because it's been going on so long, and you see that every week. You go in there. So, we've been down. We've known each other for so long and all that, and we've obviously know all the same people. but yeah, no, I'm very good tributes to the longevity of MPW. It's very impressive, and it's something again to be held in high regard. So it's great to be a part of it, and like you said, there's so much history now. You got guys from back in like John Cena to now, and it's unbelievable if you would put like, let's say, a history package together, which I think should be done, by the way.
And it will be. It's just it's one of those things where like you don't know that you're dealing with people who are going to be really significant in the business until they become that, and that takes some time. But my best interactions with the guys were not with the names that have gone on to whatever. It's with those guys who are there every week, the workhorses of the promotion. They, the cool thing is this is like, because I don't depend on wrestling for my income, it's a thing where it can just exist for as long as people want to be a part of it and people want to do it, because it can fluctuate in terms of how much time I need to put in it or not. But for the most part, I have such a good crew. And again, like as of this point, I don't want to say it's more Danny's promotion than it is mine, but he's the lifeblood of that place. And he puts so much of his time, effort, and energy into that. Like people don't understand, even the guys who come around from other places. The amount of effort that dude puts into making sure the show happens every week, that the flyer's done, that it's edited, he writes the shows, and what's so cool about it is the way that he writes things. He writes things that make people feel the person going through the story will feel good about it as they're going through that process. We had a wrestler come over from somewhere else where she was, there was maybe some mistreatment of some way happening, and the story he wrote to accommodate that was basically like it was a reflection of her real life journey through wrestling. And then what ended up happening with her was like at the end of the story, she defeats evil, and that's that. So, and that's not stuff people know, but it's a reflection of his heart. So it's almost like, again, sometimes just getting out of the way is the best thing. I don't need to encroach on what's going on there because he's doing such a good job. Now he could quit tomorrow. He could quit tomorrow and go off and whatever, and the machine will keep going. Because at the end of the day, if everybody leaves, I'll still be there to pick up the pieces, and I'll just open up the doors to the next person. But I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if the place will ever run as good as it does under the guy who's running it right now. So,
yeah, and it's very impressive the work that you're seeing right now. Like, I mean, really, week after week, there's some very impressive stuff, and I'm seeing it firsthand. I'm there, and I'm just really vouching. It's excellence, man. It's top notch. It is a television product, and again, I'm not a part of that at all, unless it's like, again, some title match network thing or whatever. So kudos to you, because there's so many other shows and none of them are treated like a TV product. And you can do that nowadays with YouTube. You don't need to be on a television channel anymore.
Right. That's the thing, is like I don't want to say we have low budget. It's like no budget. It's run on elbow grease, shoestrings, and love. We got a guy, Nick, that donates all kinds of time there, and it works in production, and he does some amazing things over there. And it's all out of love. It's not stuff that he has to do. It's stuff that he wants to do for the promotion. If we didn't have things like that happen, then we wouldn't be able to put out what we put out. But because all those things kind of come into place, it's like if you join the promotion tomorrow and you come in and your character's whatever it is, even if that's where you wrestle and how you wrestle everywhere else, if you come in and you work 52 shows for us over the course of the year, your character's going to evolve organically, whether you know it is or not, because there's only so many stories you can tell when you have to play to the same audience over and over again. So you're going to be a heel sometimes. Eventually, you're going to turn face, and then maybe you turn back or whatever. One of my favorite things about MPWs, honestly, is just watching Ray Rosas be Ray Rosas. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever watched the evolutions of his character, it's almost like the seasons that come. He's always Ray Rosas, but sometimes he's wild and crazy Ray Rosas. Sometimes he's hate Ray Rosas. He was just doing that kind of quasi Undertaker gimmick thing where they were all that spiritual powers nonsense.
Yeah.
His run as Ray America, where he's doing it's the Republican Party, and he's doing this like heavy tribute to America all the time, and the stable that they had because he became the national champion. It's so much fun to watch him just be himself. It's like
right.
The titles move around to different guys. Everybody, it's not everybody gets a belt at some point, but like, again, 52 shows a year, there's 3 different titles that are there. Stuff moves around. So it's like, okay, the national title is going to end up on Ray. Okay, well, how do I make the national title something that's more significant? And so then he creates this whole storyline about it, and it was just awesome. And stuff from Ray's brain, stuff from Danny's brain, like, there's other guys that help out with that. People ain't supposed to know, but shout out to Daniel Moon and Brendan, wherever they are right now. There's so much effort that goes into that, and it's just it's fun to watch. It's fun to be surprised. It's fun to watch new stuff happen. I'm like, oh man, I've watched 80,000 wrestling matches, never seen that before. So, and they still do it. They still pop me sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, is there anything else you want to cover or give any shout outs or talk about anybody that maybe we skimmed over?
To anybody that has been part of my promotion at some point or not, thank you for the effort that you put in. Not everybody left on good terms. That's not something that I am happy about. But in a business creative situation, sometimes things go a little sideways. There are tons of people who I want to thank for their contributions. Couple of them come to mind. From eras past. JR the Hell Kid, Lords, Bo Cooper. There's so many guys from the previous era, guys who aren't with us anymore. Dynamite D, loved having Darren work for the promotion. Clint, Ecstasy, Triple X, whatever you want to call him, he is a tremendous reason why we're still around. Everybody that contributed, that helped keep MPW alive at different times, to where it could get to the point right now where it can just keep it. It's kind of like it's just the ball's rolling now and it's just picking up steam as it's going. I think that it'll continue that way. I think the longer we exist, the more likely it is that you're going to see either something bigger happen with the promotion, or something happen where some of our guys start getting snapped up into bigger and better opportunities. And so I say thank you, and if you're watching, keep watching, because it's just going to get better from here.
Paul, once again, can you give everyone the info about how they could attend MPW shows every Friday night, and also shout out, for any info on the wrestling school again?
Sure. So MPW is located at the second floor of Boulder-SFV, located at 19801 Nordhoff Place, Suite 110 in Chatsworth, California, 91311. Our phone number is 805-630-6888. You can call there for any information that you want on the promotion. Once again, that's 805-630-6888. Rates for training are $300 down and then $200 a month after that. Our shows are every Friday night at 7:30. Tickets are $15 for adults, $10 for kids. It is the best money you're going to spend because it costs more than that to go see a movie. You're going to see a 2.5-hour live wrestling show over and over again. So that's where you can find us. I'm trying not to sound as much like an answering machine as I did when I said that, but play it back in slow-mo or give me a text if you got any questions at that number. That is we'll answer day and night. But we're there every week, rain or shine.
Great. Kris, is there anything you'd like to throw in here before we close out?
Just to add to that, go to youtube.com/Millennium Pro Wrestling. That's where you will see everything archived, the weekly events. Like, share, comment, subscribe to that channel. If you can't be there, subscribe to that channel. That supports independent wrestling. But yeah, 19801 Nordhoff Place, Chatsworth, California, 7:30 p.m. bail time every Friday night. That's right. I know that very well.
Yeah, I hear you put that out.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. And hey, thanks for being here. This was awesome. This was, man, it was a trip down memory lane for Eric and myself as well, just hearing you talk about all these everybody that we all used to know, so and still know. Good times, and thank you for being here, my friend. I hope to see you in a couple days on Friday.
Oh yeah, I'll be there.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been great catching up with you here.
Good, Eric. When are you gonna come down and ref again?
I don't know. I think those days are done.
Are they? All right. Yeah. Well, I'm confident we'll be able to get you in at least one more time.
Hey, you know what? I'll do it if Patrick will do an MPW show. I'll do it alongside him.
Patrick's worked for me before. Pat, if you want to get out there and get back in there again, I'd be more than happy to have you ref a match.
That would be great.
Awesome.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us once again. For Logan X, for my co-host Eric Melikian, my name is Kris Kloss. We'll see you next time right here. Again, like, share, comment, subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next time on another episode of the Wrestling with Reality podcast. Thank you and good night.